that is with that briefing on our foster care report card. I know I've been asked, why are we continuing this for another day? And, this is the first time that we've had a report on foster care. First time we've seen this report card, and so I think it's appropriate as we move forward that, first of all, we have a full understanding of what's in that report card, and that can perhaps guide us to some action in the future. So, Craig, if you want to kick off for us, we have Dr. Craig Nunswander, Deputy Commissioner of Education for KSDE. Thank you for being back with us, Craig, and we are ready for your presentation.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. And as you stated, this is the first year for the report card, so it's our first attempt at it as well. This report card is based on the governor's executive order from last summer, but the data elements in that order are the same as those listed in Senate Bill 51 that you've already addressed as a committee moving forward. I believe you have a copy of the report card with you. The law would require that DCF and KSDE work together to create the report card. The vast majority of the data comes from KSDE. We get assistance from DCF identifying the foster care students. School districts do not necessarily always know if a student is in foster care when they're enrolled in their school. Most of the time they do, but that's not a guarantee. So DCF provides KSDE with the names of the students that are in foster care across the state. And then we provide those to school districts as best we can, matching them up with their area of residence. So the data that you have in front of you is that required in Senate Bill 51. And on the first page, you see the number of students, attendance rate, and right off the bat, if you look at the attendance rate, initially you think that it's a good sign of data that maybe doesn't tell the whole story. You'll see all foster care students, 91.4% is a pretty good attendance rate actually. For all students across the state, it's 94.5, so it's down a little bit. But I'd direct your attention then to the lower left-hand corner of that first page where it talks about chronic absenteeism. And that's defined as a student who misses 10% or more of the school days per year, with or without a valid excuse. So there very well may be a good reason they're absent, but being chronically absent can create some issues. And there you see that percentage is pretty high compared to the rest of the students in the state. So that tells you that the foster care students who are missing school are missing quite a few days, which creates some issues. So first glance at the data doesn't always tell us the full story. And I won't belabor the rest of the points for you. I'll just kind of go through what's here. Graduation rate, I will comment on that. We do not have yet a full 4-year cohort's worth of data for graduation rate. So that table is as accurate as the information we have, but it may look a little different in another year or two's time when we have a full set of data to work from on foster care students. Dropout rate is right across from that.
Could you stop for just a moment? I think there's a little bit of question about everybody being able to find the information. Did we find it? Okay. It was in yesterday's. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. On the second page, we start to get into assessment results. And probably the first thing you'll notice is the right-hand columns for 1920. Since schools were not in session last spring, there were no assessment results. So you see NAs. In the earlier 2 years, 17-18 and 18-19, the reason you'll see NA in some places, for student data privacy, we cannot report numbers less than 10. If there are fewer than 10 students in a category, we're not allowed to report that. So you'll see NA in a number of locations on all of the assessment data as we move through that. And so what you see here is for math assessment, and I'll reiterate a question yesterday about the levels. Levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 on all of the assessments. 4 is the high end of performance. 1 is the low end of performance. And as you move on through the report, you'll see assessment data for English language arts. And on all of them, you'll see all foster care students and then disaggregated. And the next page will have science assessments. And as you move on to the fourth page, another set of data we don't have all the information necessary for yet is academically prepared for post-secondary success. And then the table under that, I need to comment on a little bit, promoted to the next grade level. When we went through the data last week to prepare this report, we talked about how we calculated promoted to the next grade level. And short version is we made an error in the way we calculated. The data we have is correct. The way we used it to calculate it is not, we don't believe. And I'll explain it at layman's version because that's all I understand. If we were looking at who was promoted from 3rd to 4th grade as a foster care student, we looked at the students in foster care in 3rd grade and then looked at the students in foster care in 4th grade. And if that student was not listed in that 4th grade foster care group, we assumed they were not promoted, which makes sense at first glance. But we don't receive information when a student exits the foster care system. So we were missing all those students who were in 3rd grade in the foster care system, exited foster care sometime between 3rd and 4th grade and were promoted. So the percentages you see on this table are much lower than they should be. And we sent a corrected table over, I believe, Monday morning, which you may have. I'm not sure how easy it will be for you to find if it was provided for you. So I'll just tell you, the table that's on the full sheet, you see the percent of all foster care students being promoted to the next grade level is 50.7. That number should actually be 79.5, or about 80%. So there's almost a 30% difference when you take into account those students who exited out of foster care as they changed from one grade level to the next.
Craig, can you hold on for just a moment?
Certainly.
That is his separate testimony. So if you look for his separate testimony, we have a new chart there. Craig, could you explain why the total number, so all foster care students is different? Because the original calculation, it said there were 3,328 kids. And in the proposed calculation, you're saying there are 5,198. So how is it that we have almost 2,000 more kids in that calculation?
I'll tell you what I think is correct, and then Kathy Grossenbacher, our director of IT, can correct me. In the original calculation, the 3,328 number, we were just counting all the kids who were in foster care in 3rd grade and then kids who were in foster care in 4th grade, and then continue that same thing all the way through all the grade levels. We were leaving out kids who were in foster care in 3rd grade but exited out before they got to 4th grade. So they were still a student in foster care for purposes of this data collection, but weren't counted in the list in 4th grade the way we looked at it the first time. And they should have been. So we were leaving out quite a few students.
Thank you.
Okay. The next table we were asked to provide numbers on is those participating in the Mental Health Intervention Team Pilot Program. And you'll see those numbers are limited quite a bit. Part of that is because not every district in the state participates. And I'm sorry, I should have looked this up. I want to say we have 53 or 56 districts participating in that program. So that immediately is going to limit the number of foster care students that are represented in that program. But there you see the numbers of those students participating. And on the last page, preschool enrollment numbers for students in foster care. And then there are two pieces of data that are to be a part of the report that we couldn't report this year because we don't have the data in the format that allows us to pull foster care students. And that's discipline data that deals with suspensions and expulsions. Since we knew when this school year started that we needed to have that data for future reports, we are gathering it in a format so we can report that beginning next year. We will have that discipline data available to go with, to add into this report. But for this year, it hadn't been submitted in that with those students identified, so we couldn't pull it for the report. And I would stand for any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig. Committee, what questions do you have? Senator Gossage.
So if I understood, thank you, Madam Chair, and that you sent over an updated statement, and do we have that? Or, and where would that be if we do?
His updated statement with regard to kids that move forward from one grade to the next. It's under testimony, and it's under his name. It's under Craig's name.
And I just have the first one that came. I don't have the second one. Are you saying you haven't given it to us, Cindy?
If you scroll up on the first one, you will see on the second page, you will see foster care students promoted to next grade level, and you'll see original calculation in the table, and right next to it is the proposed calculation. And Craig, understanding you, the proposed calculation is the new.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
and that
correct.
would have shown up yesterday.
Yeah. Maybe I need to refresh. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. It's okay. You can go ahead, though.
Okay. Other questions? Yes. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Craig. On that mental health intervention, I remember you were talking about that not everyone, is there a percentage of the students who had access to that participated in that mental health program? Could we get that number, or is it possible?
Let me make sure I understand the question. Do you want to know the percentage of total foster care students that had access to the program?
Yes, if they had access
Okay.
to the program and they participated, what is that percentage?
I'll have to check and see if we have the data in that we can pull that way. I believe we do, and if so, we will send that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Committee. Mine shows up. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Craig, is that issue with the promotion to the next grade level the issue that some of the providers were worried about, that they were being dropped off the promotion list because they weren't there in fourth grade, your third to fourth grade example?
I believe, yes, I haven't had a chance to visit directly with them, but from reading their emails, I think that was one of their primary questions. And they
Okay.
were correct. Our data was not right.
Is there, and may I ask another question, Madam Chair?
You may.
Is there going to be an issue with graduation rates for the same reason or not?
With
Do you think that might be?
graduation, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. I believe with graduation rate, the data and the way we're looking at it is correct. The issue there is we don't have a full set of data yet. You determine graduation on a 4-year cohort, and we have not been receiving the foster care students information for enough years to develop a full 4-year cohort set. And I'll ask Kathy Grossenbacher if I said that correctly.
Yes, Craig, you did. We started receiving data from DCF in 2018. So we have a couple of years of that data. So our graduates for this year, our 2021 graduates, we will actually have that 4-year cohort for the foster care subgroup to be able to accurately report that out.
I think as a point of clarification, you're talking about graduation from high school or graduation from college?
high school, ma'am.
Okay, just want to make sure that we have that. Did the hours required for foster kids, was that reduced even more last year? I know for kids not in foster, it was reduced from 28 credits to 21, which is normally what we have for graduation credits required for a foster child. Was that reduced any for a foster child?
I believe, and I may have to refer to a revisor, but I believe it is 21 that a foster, 21 credits for high school graduation that a foster child can use if they choose, rather than the number of credits that may be required by the local board.
Right, I didn't know if that was reduced more last year due to COVID as it was for other students. If we might check on that. And actually, that stems from a hearing that we had last year where foster kids reported that they were chastised, that they were graduating with less credits than everyone else. And there was really kind of a concern on behalf of foster kids that there was a stigma that they were receiving from administration of different school districts. So if you could check on that, that would be helpful. Senator Gossage, you had another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really more of a comment, and that is to have this data on the foster children be relevant. Some of it does compare them or give us data and numbers compared to regularly enrolled students as opposed to foster care students, but some of the data does not. So I would just say going forward on the report card, it would be very helpful for all of them to be compared to the total population of students. Thank you.
Other comments, committee? Yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this report card. I think it's very helpful. My question is, so we have the data, now what? What do we do with this data to inform decisions about how to better serve our foster care students? It's extremely alarming to me that I see, especially amongst our African-American foster care students, that 92% across the board are scoring in those bottom two levels. And so my question is, I don't want the data to be, okay, we've done the report, we've gathered the data. I want to know how we're going to use this to help those students. Thank you.
Absolutely the right question to ask, Senator. Thank you. The intention of the data, as I said, DCF posts it on their website, and that's all well and good. The data doesn't do any good until we get it in the hands of school districts and work with them, and DCF can work with them on what the specific issues are for each student. And so that what we do, I believe, comes down to the local school district working with DCF to determine why that issue existed in the first place for that particular student. Whether it's because of, they happen to be one who's moved multiple times, they've got other issues in their background that are creating problems, or as a school, we're just not connecting with that particular student. And it has nothing to do with the fact they're in foster care. We're just not connecting with them. So I think it's a different answer for each individual student. And I think each individual school district will need to address that specifically. I guess I'll stop there. I could go on for too long, probably.
Well, I think to piggyback on that, I think that the committee really does want to know, and we would urge that there be an action plan. When we look at those assessment levels where we see that 50% across the board, more than 50% are at level 1 in math, English language, and sciences. And that kind of gets to this issue. So in an effort to make sure that we have data for the report card, on the one hand, it was good to see that DCF was working so that within 3 days, a school district would get notification that this child is in foster care. But I guess the question is, when we have state assessments, and of course, this year we don't have the benefit of any state assessments last year. So when a child entered into a new school this year, were any assessments run to see really academically where they were? Is there any utilization of those free assessments that are available to school districts to just assess where they are so that they can immediately begin getting that additional support, that remediation, if you will? Do we know if there's anything systematically being done? Or is this going to be a situation where they wait until next year? And I'm concerned because we're in March. There's not much time left in the school year. I am concerned about whether or not any plans are going to be in place for the start of next school year. I don't want us to wait until we're here a year from now looking at a report card to hear these are the intentions to help move up those scores. I also recognize that the scores that we're looking at are static for that group of students that took the assessment at that time. And we very well may be looking at completely different set of students for that next set of assessment data. So how is DCF and how is the Department of Education looking at that?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The first question about assessments up to now during this school year, school districts use interim assessments throughout the year. Some use the ones that are available free that you mentioned from the University of Kansas that are tied with our our state assessment program. Others use research-based assessments like FastRidge and others to provide that interim data throughout the year so they can make instructional decisions based upon where the students are at that time. And those take place early in the year and then periodically throughout the year. There is no one prescribed interim assessment that school districts are required to take. So they use the assessment that matches best with their curriculum and their instructional practices at the local level. So those, along with the state assessments, are used to plan instructional practices for the coming year. So districts will have results back from the state assessments sometime in May of this year. So they will be able to use the common statewide assessment that every student takes to make instructional decisions for the coming year. They don't have to wait until next fall. We have data that we can aggregate statewide. They can make their local decisions immediately.
Okay, and how confident do we feel, do we have a sense of, is DCF getting the notification to school districts within the 3 days? How confident are we that that's happening today?
All I would have is anecdotal information. There are still some times when the records do not reach the school within 3 days. And part of that, and I shouldn't speak for DCF, but I know just from experience, part of that is due to the situation. When a student has to be moved late in the evening and they don't have a chance to visit with the school that the student's leaving, it takes an extra day or two. And I'm talking for DCF, so I should probably stop.
That's fine. One last question, Senator Sykes.
And thank you. And I don't know if you'll have the answer for this, Craig, but maybe research or someone can get back to me. But as we've looked historically at, some of our other programs that maybe have had wraparound services. I'm looking at the implementation of the HOPE Act and how that takes people off SNAP and things earlier, and how maybe that transitions and affects kids. Because I know if you're going in and you don't have food and there's those other issues, ACEs, that definitely foster kids have, but maybe how some of the shifts in how we approach helping those families before even they're in foster care, how that might affect those numbers. That's a big ask, sorry.
It's all right, Senator. Thank you. And you were correct with your first statement. I wouldn't have that answer, but I'll see what we can find out for you.
Thank you.
I think anecdotally, the more effective those are, the fewer kids we should be having in foster care. And that's one of the unfortunate things is the number has stayed relatively static. We haven't been able to really get a significant or even a marked decline in the number of kids in foster care. But that, I think, is something that to me would be one of those indicators. If we can get a decline in the number of kids in foster care due to those earlier interventions, that would be helpful. Committee, I think we're going to go ahead and end this briefing. I want to thank Craig and Kathy so much for holding over and meeting with us today. I know you got a little bit of a start yesterday, but thank you for allowing us to really dig a little deeper into the data. Certainly appreciate the correction to the table with regard to kids being promoted from one grade to the next. And that's one of the things is when I received this draft, I was very troubled by the 50%. It came up on a floor debate, which led people to start to wonder, wait, is it really that low? And so we got that corrected version, which is what it's supposed to be about. So thank you very much on that. Committee, we are now going to move on to a hearing on House Bill 2124, and we will start with our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2124 relates to healing arts schools. This committee heard and passed on the consent calendar the Senate version of this bill, Senate Bill 55, earlier this year. House Bill 2124 is identical to Senate Bill 55. Current law requires a healing arts school to be approved by the State Board of Regents in order to be exempt from the prohibition on the corporate practice of healing arts. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on why this bill is needed. In 2017, Senate Bill 166 exempted Cleveland University from the Private and Out-of-State Post-Secondary Educational Institution Act. Because of that exemption, Cleveland University is no longer required to have State Board of Regents approval. This creates a conflict in the law because now Cleveland University no longer meets the requirements of the corporate practice of healing arts law. Section 3 of House Bill 2124 would cure that conflict by clarifying that any law prohibiting the practice of healing arts by a business organization would not apply to a healing arts school clinic if it is under the supervision of a person licensed to practice the same branch of healing arts, so long as the healing arts school clinic is approved by the Board of Healing Arts, a nonprofit entity, and either approved by the Board of Regents or exempt from their approval under the Private and Post-Secondary Educational Institution Act. Additionally, sections 1 and 2 of the bill clarify the law regarding training for students at affiliated off-campus clinics by adding the phrase healing arts school clinic authorized to perform services to the definitions in the Professional Corporation Law of Kansas and the Kansas Revised Limited Liability Company Act. The bill would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have? Tamara, would you share again? You said this is exactly identical to the Senate version that passed. Is that correct? Okay. Senator Dahl asked this question a couple years ago on the Senate floor because we had two bills that were identical. And he wanted to know, why did one of these bills not just go to the governor since we have two identical bills? So step us through. I know that we're always looking for shells before we get to the end of the legislative process. So how do we get this resolved?
So even though the subject matter of House Bill 2124 and Senate Bill 55 are the same, they have different bill numbers. And when getting a bill to the governor, it's the bill number that matters. So one of those bills, either 2124 or 55, has to pass both chambers, the House and the Senate, in order to get to the governor. So far, each one of those bills has only passed one of those chambers.
Thank you for that lesson for our committee. Any other questions of Tamara? Thank you very much, Tamara. We have with us Julie Hine from Hine Government Consulting. Thank you for being with us today, Julie. Please turn on your mic.
Hello, Madam Chairman and committee. I will be short because the revisor did a great job of explaining that. This is identical to Senate Bill 55, which we did have a hearing on earlier, and I'll refer you to Dr. Carl Cleveland's testimony, which is on file. He submitted written, so we wouldn't duplicate our previous testimony. We need the language to pass both chambers to get to the governor, and that's why, part of the reason we actually have two bills this year, and we started in both chambers, is because last year was such a unusual session, and it was just because of that interruption before session was over, it was hard to get a lot of issues that were non-controversial and yet get them actually passed through both chambers. So this is identical. We would ask for your support and just make sure that this issue did get clarified and get passed on to the governor in whichever bill or both. And we would ask for your support there. Happy to answer questions if you need any clarification.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Committee, I do want to just draw your attention. We have the written testimony from Dr. Cleveland, from Travis Ollinger, Executive Director of Kansas Chiropractic Association, as well as Matt Lindsay, who's going to testify on the next bill. So I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 2124. We're now going to move into a hearing on House Bill 2070. And so we will go back to our revisor for an overview on House Bill 2070.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2070 would allow not-for-profit private post-secondary educational institutions to impose a surcharge when payments are made to the institution with a credit or debit card. Under Kansas law, a seller is prohibited from imposing a surcharge on payments with a credit or debit card unless there is a specific exemption. Currently, the law provides specific exemptions for state agencies, including regents institutions, and a specific exemption for municipal universities, community colleges, technical colleges, and vocational schools. So those institutions can impose a surcharge when payments are made with a credit or debit card. House Bill 2070 would expand that exception to include not-for-profit private post-secondary educational institutions exempt from the Kansas Private and Out-of-State Post-Secondary Educational Institution Act. And that would allow those institutions the ability to impose a surcharge when a payment is made to that institution with a credit or debit card. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, do you have any questions? Seeing none, let's move on to testimony. Matt Lindsay, welcome back, President and CEO of Kansas Independent College Association and Foundation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Matt Lindsay, the president of the Kansas Independent College Association. It's nice to have such a highly competent revisor who explained this bill really, really well and took care of most of my testimony today. So thank you, Tamara. So what I want to talk about a little bit is why this matters and why we asked for this to be done this way. The prohibition on passing on that surcharge to the end payer is in the Uniform Commercial Code. That's a complicated thing that we didn't want to monkey with and open up. So over several years, this is an example of what I would think the legislature would like to see, is we worked quietly behind the scenes with other stakeholders, including the Kansas Bankers Association, to find a way to write an amendment or a bill that satisfies their worries, avoids messing with the UCC, but also make sure that we, the private nonprofit colleges, can be treated equitably with our public university and community college counterparts. It's also important from a competitive standpoint for us, not just with them, but with the private colleges in the regional in states around us. Most states in the United States allow private colleges, allow private vendors of any kind to charge a surcharge to those who use a credit card. Kansas is one of 9 states, I believe at this point, that do not allow sellers to pass on that surcharge or to recover that surcharge. So we take a school in the Kansas City area. They're not just competing with the Regents universities and the community colleges in Kansas for students to make sure tuition stays low. They're competing with schools in Missouri. William Jewell and Rockhurst can pass that on. Creighton in Nebraska can pass that surcharge on. Why does that matter? The school has to find a way to pay that bill in some way or another. So for many of the Kansas independent colleges, that bill can be $100,000, $200,000 a year. If they cannot charge that surcharge to the person who chooses to use a credit card, then everybody has to pay that bill. So in fact, not having this ability to pass it on forces tuition up for everybody, which makes private colleges in Kansas less competitive with our counterparts in public and private sector. So this is and I want to make sure I emphasize, is adding nonprofit colleges to an existing exemption to say that for the purposes of higher education, the surcharge should be able to be recovered by a school. So I hope you will help us support this. This is another one of those bills that last year we had moving through the House pretty quickly, and then COVID hit. We are proud that we've been getting the hearing on this, and we hope we have your support to help us with this one. I'd be happy to answer questions, and I have a few of our CFOs from our schools who can tell a little more specific details on how this affects their schools here on the line.
Thank you. Senator O'Shea, is this specific to the bill? We have 3 proponents also that want to testify virtually, but if you have a question of clarification, let's get that taken care of. Oh, sorry, we do have 3 more that are going to testify, so. Okay, let's go ahead and call on. We have Shelly Nubian, Vice President, Finance and Administration for Baker University. Shelly, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator Baumgardner and members of the Senate Education Committee. I appreciate you affording us the opportunity to visit for just a second. As luck would have it, my phone is, of course, ringing. Sorry for that. Wanted to just enter our support for this particular bill. I participated in the House committee that considered the same bill, and as Mr. Lindsay shared, this is a cost to the university that for Baker University is about $200,000 a year. About 50% of our students are electing to pay with debit card or credit card online for the convenience of that. And because we cannot pass on the surcharge fee that we're charged from those companies, we're required to then fund that from our operating budget, which takes away our ability to support our educational missions, scholarships, faculty, supplies, etc. So with the pandemic, of course, every institution was hit very hard. Baker's no different. Our enrollment has been impacted. And we're looking at all sorts of different ways that we can try to trim cost and be more efficient, but yet not compromise on our academic quality. So it's these kinds of things that if we could do would help to relieve a little bit of that pressure without, it being a huge impact on the students that choose to pay by credit card or debit card. We still would allow and do allow our students to use checks as well as cash. And so we would certainly continue that. And we are not looking at making any kind of, profit on this. This would be purely a pass-through fee. It wouldn't be something that would benefit Baker financially. in terms of some kind of a surcharge even on top of that. So we do ask that you support this bill. And if you have any questions at all, we're glad to answer those. And again, just appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts for a couple of quick minutes.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Nancy Bramlett, Vice President of Finance and Administrative Services for the University of St. Mary. Nancy, are you with us? Do we see Nancy?
I'm here. I'm terribly sorry. I was having trouble with the mute button.
No problem.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the university. The university incurs about $90,000 a year in credit card fees. And, you know, we're a relatively small institution. Many of our students are low income, first generation. Approximately 43% are Pell Grant students. So it's a struggle for us to try to balance keeping tuition affordable for undergraduate students, but being fiscally responsible at the same time. So again, these cost $90,000 a year and upwards, we have to find that someplace else. So either we increase tuition or we have to cut costs in other areas. So that's important to us. We should also note that we give our students the opportunity to pay via ACH check or credit card. All of those things do not bear a fee for us. And it's important to note too that our bankers charge us about 2.5% on our credit card fees. And I think that's kind of at the low end of the range. I've heard like some merchant providers will charge up to 5%. So I can't even imagine how that impacts some of the other schools in the area. So I ask for your support in supporting this bill. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last up, we have Ronald Ollinger, Chief Financial Officer for Benedictine College. Ronald, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senate Education Committee. I am testifying as a proponent in support of House Bill 2070. I'd like to echo what my colleagues at the other other private institutions have testified. You know, in fiscal year 2019 and 20 alone, 32% of our tuition fees, room and board were paid with credit cards. This is over $250,000 cost, and it represented 10% of our annual fund donations for last year. So annual fund donations that are normally used to cover student scholarships and other operating costs of the college must be used to cover this lost revenue. So Benedictine College supports House Bill 2070 and which would grant us permission to do what the Regent Universities, Washburn and Kansas Community College already can do. This isn't about just lost revenue and an inability to use those funds for student aid, but instead it's also about a competitive imbalance. We're looking to level the playing field with other higher education and public institutions, and we ask for your support. I would take any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much for all of you that have testified. So we will start with Senator O'Shea with her question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this would be for the revisor. We all know when we purchase something online, sometimes you're warned if you choose to use credit card, you know, you get to pay the extra 3%. And then I'm like, okay, I'll find a different way to do that. So my question is there something in there that would require the warning that's passed on to the person to let them know, by the way, if you choose to use your credit card in this instance, you're charged the additional X%?
Tamara, are you there? I think it's silent in the bill to that, isn't it? And Matt, we'll go ahead and call on you if you want to address that issue.
Matt Lindsay, Kansas Independent College Association. Yes, the bill is silent on this. It does not require notification. The current exemption from the prohibition that extends to the Regents, Washburn, the community technical colleges is also, the statute underlying this is also silent on that question.
Follow-up question?
Is that something the proponents would be opposed to?
I don't think we would be opposed to it. I think we're probably going to do it anyway, in the same way that you purchase something online, or if you go to the DMV and you see, because we have to still post something that says paying with a credit card requires a additional surcharge. There's something will have to be posted to as an alert to someone, and that may affect your choice. But I don't know if there would be any way to not notify someone before completing the transaction.
Last follow-up, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you. Is that currently a state law or a federal law that you do have to warn people? Because in most cases that does happen. So if it's...
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think that would be something that we could ask legislative research to get us that information. Okay. Questions? I am not seeing any further questions, so I want to thank all of the participants for their testimony today. On this bill, as well as Senate Bill, or House Bill 2124, there was no opposition testimony. There was no neutral testimony. All were proponent testimony. So I will close the hearing on House Bill 2070. Committee, we will this next week, we have a full schedule for next week. When we have time, we will work on bills. So be ready if you have amendments for any bills to have those prepared. So I will at this time call meeting adjourned.